The first time my brother told me I existed to pay for his dreams, I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I genuinely thought he was joking. I wish I had known better. My name is Charlotte Bennett. I'm 34, and until a year ago I believed family meant sacrifice. I thought helping the people you loved was simply what decent people did. I grew up in a quiet town just outside London with my younger brother, Oliver. Our parents weren't wealthy, but they always insisted that we were rich in love. Looking back, I realized the love wasn't shared equally. Oliver was the miracle child, the charming one, the future entrepreneur, the boy who just needed support. I was the reliable daughter, the one who never complained, the one who always fixed everything. When Dad lost his job, I worked evenings while studying at university. When Mum became ill, I postponed my own plans to care for her. When Oliver decided he wanted to build a business empire, everyone somehow looked at me. Charlotte has a stable salary. Charlotte doesn't mind helping. Charlotte always lands on her feet. It became a family tradition. Every financial emergency somehow ended in my bank account. After university, I became a financial analyst in London. The hours were brutal, but the pay was good. Good enough that everyone assumed I could solve their problems. At first, it was small. £200 here, 500 there. A loan that would be paid back next month. Months turned into years. The repayments never came. Instead, the requests became expectations. Oliver bounced from one business idea to another. A luxury gym, an online fashion brand, a cryptocurrency consultancy, a podcast. Every idea failed, not because he lacked talent, because he refused to work hard. Failure, according to Oliver, was always someone else's fault. The market, the economy, his business partners, his customers, never him. Meanwhile, I worked 12-hour days, saved carefully, and eventually bought a modest flat in London. It wasn't extravagant, just a place that finally felt like mine. I thought I'd escaped. I hadn't. Almost every weekend my parents invited me for Sunday lunch. I'd arrive carrying dessert. Oliver would arrive carrying another excuse. Then someone would clear their throat, usually Mum. "Charlotte, your brother just needs a little help." Every single time. I stopped counting after the 20th little help. Then came Oliver's biggest dream yet. He wanted to open a luxury events company. Apparently weddings, corporate parties, celebrity launches. He was convinced he'd found his calling. He created expensive brochures, a polished website, professional photographs. Everything looked impressive, except one tiny detail. He had no clients, no experience, no savings, but he did have confidence. Enough confidence to ask me for £40,000. I almost dropped my coffee. 40,000? It's an investment, Oliver said, smiling. I don't have 40,000 sitting around. You own a flat. I stared at him. You want me to remortgage my home? It's temporary, Dad nodded. It's for family. Mum reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You know Oliver will make us proud. What about me? I wanted to ask. Hadn't I already spent years making them proud? Instead, I quietly said no. It was the first time I'd ever refused. The room went silent. Oliver leaned back in his chair. You've changed. No, I've finally learned the difference between helping and enabling. His smile disappeared. For weeks, nobody spoke to me properly. Family messages stopped. Sunday lunches suddenly became canceled. I felt guilty. Then I reminded myself that guilt doesn't pay mortgages. 3 months later, Oliver somehow found investors, or so everyone claimed. His company launched with champagne, photographers, and social media influencers. The family couldn't stop talking about it. Dad kept saying, I always knew he'd make it. Mum framed newspaper clippings from a local business magazine. I wasn't invited to the launch party. Apparently there wasn't enough space. I found out later half the guests were strangers. That hurt more than I expected. Still, I carried on. Life became peaceful, until my mother's 60th birthday. She wanted everyone together. No arguments, she insisted. For one evening. I agreed. I bought her a sapphire necklace she'd admired months earlier. It cost more than I should have spent, but I wanted the night to be special. The restaurant overlooked the Thames. Elegant. Expensive. Oliver arrived in a tailored navy suit. Designer watch. New sports car parked outside. He made sure everyone noticed. Throughout dinner, he spoke almost exclusively about himself. My company's expanding. We're taking on premium clients. I'm considering opening in Manchester. Every sentence began with I. Eventually, Dad raised his glass. To Oliver. Everyone applauded. Then Dad looked at me. And thank you, Charlotte, for always supporting your brother. I blinked. Supporting? I hadn't given him a penny. Oliver laughed. Oh, come on. What? You've always paid for my dreams. I haven't, he smirked. Loud enough for the entire table to hear. No, Charlotte. He took a slow sip of wine. You exist to pay for my dreams. People at neighboring tables glanced over. I felt heat rush into my face. Excuse me, he shrugged. Hate it, then he smiled. Leave. The table fell silent. Mum looked away. Dad said nothing. Not one person defended me. That's when I realized something. They all agreed with him. I slowly placed my knife and fork on the plate. I looked around the table, at the people I'd sacrificed years for. Then I stood. If that's truly what you all believe, I reached into my handbag. Then perhaps it's finally time everyone heard where Oliver's successful company actually got its money. Oliver's smile vanished instantly. For the first time in years, my brother looked afraid. The smile disappeared from Oliver's face so quickly it almost made me laugh. He wasn't frightened because I'd raised my voice. He was frightened because he knew I wasn't bluffing. Dad frowned. Charlotte, this isn't the time. No, I replied calmly. This is exactly the time. The restaurant had grown noticeably quieter. A few nearby diners pretended not to listen, but their eyes kept drifting towards our table. Oliver leaned forward, lowering his voice. Sit down. I've spent years sitting down. You're embarrassing Mum. I looked at my mother. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. For years, I had protected this family from uncomfortable truths. Tonight, I was done protecting people who had never protected me. I placed my handbag on the empty chair beside me. You've all been congratulating Oliver for building a successful company from nothing, I began. But that's not what happened. Dad sighed impatiently. Charlotte, no, Dad, you've spent years telling everyone how hardworking your son is. Maybe they deserve to hear the full story. Oliver laughed, but it sounded forced. Go on then. His confidence looked convincing. Only I noticed how tightly he was gripping his wine glass. I turned to my parents. Do you remember 5 years ago when Grandma passed away? Mum nodded slowly. Of course. Do you remember what happened to the money she left us? Neither of them answered. Grandma hadn't been wealthy, but she'd worked for decades as a nurse. Before she died, she divided her savings equally between her 2 grandchildren, £25,000 each. I had used my share as a deposit on my flat. Oliver had spent his within 8 months. Designer clothes, luxury holidays, a sports car he couldn't afford to insure. When the money disappeared, he came looking for more. I said no, I told the table, for the first time in my life. Oliver rolled his eyes. Ancient history. No, I replied. It's where this story begins. After I refused him, he didn't magically become a successful businessman. He became something else. A liar. Dad's expression hardened. Enough. I'm only telling the truth. Oliver folded his arms. Fine. Tell your version. My version? I reached into my handbag and pulled out a thin brown envelope. I kept everything. Receipts, emails, bank statements, signed agreements. Years ago, when Oliver constantly promised to repay me, I'd finally started keeping records. At first, I thought it was simply sensible. Later, it became protection. I slid several photocopies across the table. Dad adjusted his glasses, his face slowly drained of color. What is this? The money. Every transfer, every unpaid loan, every emergency, every promise. The total had reached £97,840. No one spoke, not even Oliver. Mum whispered, that can't be right. It is. I watched Dad adding the figures together with trembling hands. He checked them twice, then a third time. You never told us it was this much. I couldn't help smiling sadly. Would you have listened? Silence answered for them. Oliver finally shrugged. So what? So what? You chose to help. No, you weren't forced. I was manipulated. His jaw tightened. Same thing. I looked him straight in the eyes. No, Oliver. They're very different. He leaned back again, trying to recover his usual confidence. You still haven't explained how my business concerns you. I almost admired the performance. Almost. You've been telling everyone investors believed in you. They did. Really? He nodded. Yes. I reached into the envelope once more. This time I removed a single document. I recognized the company that invested in you. Oliver froze, only for a second, but I saw it. So, I recognized it because I'd audited their accounts at work. Dad looked confused. What does that mean? It means I knew exactly who owned the investment company. Mum frowned. I don't understand. I took a slow breath. The investment company wasn't independent. Oliver's smile disappeared again. It belonged to Daniel Mercer. The name meant nothing to my parents. It meant everything to Oliver. I continued. Daniel wasn't just an investor. He was your gambling partner. Oliver stood up so abruptly his chair scraped loudly across the floor. Stop! The word came out sharper than he'd intended. People turned towards us. I stayed perfectly calm. You remember Daniel, don't you? Oliver glared at me. You've got no proof. I've got plenty. 3 years earlier, while conducting a routine financial review for a client, I'd noticed something unusual. Daniel Mercer had been repeatedly transferring money into accounts connected to Oliver. Small amounts, then larger ones, then repayments, then new transfers. It hadn't looked like investment. It had looked like debt. At the time, I'd said nothing because client confidentiality mattered. But months later, Daniel himself had contacted me privately. Not because he wanted financial advice, because he wanted to find Oliver. Oliver had vanished. He owed Daniel almost £60,000. Dad looked horrified. Gambling? Oliver laughed nervously. It wasn't gambling. What was it then? Business opportunities. I couldn't believe he was still trying. Football betting. Silence. Online casinos. More silence. High-risk poker tournaments. Mum covered her mouth. No, Oliver slammed his hand on the table. I had it under control. You lost nearly £60,000. I paid it back. No, I held up another document. Someone else paid it back. Dad stared at me. What are you saying? I looked at Oliver one last time. This successful company everyone keeps celebrating. I paused. Was never built on ambition. It was built to hide debt. Oliver whispered, Charlotte, for the first time in years. My brother wasn't smirking anymore. He was begging me with his eyes not to say another word. But I hadn't even reached the worst part yet. Oliver looked at me with a mixture of panic and anger. Charlotte, he said quietly, don't do this. I shook my head. I've spent years protecting you. Tonight I'm protecting myself. The restaurant was silent. Even the waiters had stopped pretending not to notice. Dad slowly put the documents back on the table. Charlotte, are you saying Oliver lied to all of us? I wish that was the worst of it. Oliver pushed his chair back. I'm leaving. You can, I replied, but the truth will still be here. He stopped, because he knew I had one final piece of evidence. I reached into my handbag and took out my phone. A month ago, Daniel Mercer contacted me again. Oliver's face turned white. He wanted legal advice about recovering the rest of the money Oliver still owed him. Dad looked stunned. I thought you said the debt was repaid. It wasn't. The company launch wasn't funded by investors. I opened an email and placed the phone in front of my parents. It was funded with another loan. A loan secured against, I looked directly at Oliver. Our parents' house, Mum gasped. What? Dad grabbed the phone with trembling hands. His eyes raced across the email. Then he looked at Oliver. You used our house. Oliver avoided his gaze. I was going to pay it back. When? When the business took off. Dad's voice cracked. You forged my signature. Oliver stayed silent. That silence was all the answer we needed. Mum burst into tears. I trusted you. Oliver finally snapped. Everyone needs to calm down. No, I said firmly. For years, you've expected everyone else to clean up the mess you created. You don't understand pressure. I understand responsibility. I worked weekends while you partied. I paid my own bills while you bought watches you couldn't afford. I skipped holidays to save for my future while you borrowed money pretending success was just around the corner. He laughed bitterly. Oh, here comes Saint Charlotte. I took a slow breath. No, I'm simply the only person at this table who's been honest. The words hung in the air. For the first time in years, no one rushed to defend him. Dad stood. He looked older than he had an hour earlier. Oliver, his voice was heavy. I've spent your whole life making excuses for you. I thought I was helping. I wasn't. I was teaching you that someone else would always rescue you. Oliver's confidence finally collapsed. Dad, no, Dad held up a hand. Not this time. Mum quietly removed the spare key to her house from Oliver's keyring. She placed it on the table. You need to find somewhere else to stay. Mum, I love you, but I won't help you lie anymore. Oliver looked around the table. No one moved. No one followed him. For perhaps the first time in his life, he had to face the consequences alone. Without another word, he walked out of the restaurant. The door closed behind him. No dramatic speech. No last insult. Just silence. The weeks that followed were difficult. Dad contacted a solicitor and reported the fraudulent loan. The bank launched an investigation. Daniel Mercer pursued Oliver through the courts instead of the family. For once, the responsibility belonged exactly where it should. Oliver tried calling me dozens of times. I never answered. Then came the messages. "You're ruining my life. Family doesn't do this." I said I was sorry. I read every message. Then deleted everyone, because being related to someone doesn't mean accepting their abuse. Several months later, Mum asked if we could meet for coffee. I wasn't sure, but I agreed. She looked nervous. Older. "I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do." She wiped away a tear. "I kept asking you to sacrifice because you never complained. I thought you were stronger than Oliver. You were, but that didn't mean you deserved less." It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase the years, but it was real. Dad apologized too, not with speeches, with actions. He stopped asking me to solve everyone else's problems. He treated me like a daughter instead of the family's emergency fund. As for Oliver, his events company folded within 8 months. Without borrowed money and endless excuses, there was nothing holding it together. The expensive car disappeared. The designer suits were sold. The social media posts stopped. People who only loved his success quickly disappeared as well. I heard he eventually found an ordinary job in Birmingham. For the first time, he was earning money instead of asking someone else for it. I genuinely hoped he stayed there, not because I wanted him to struggle, because I wanted him to learn. As for me, I used the money I would once have spent rescuing everyone else to rescue myself. I traveled across Scotland. I visited the Highlands I'd always dreamed of seeing. I finally took weekends off without feeling guilty. A year later, I stood on the balcony of my flat overlooking London's skyline. The same flat everyone once expected me to risk for someone else's dream. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Mum. "Sunday lunch? No pressure, we'd just love to see you." No request for money, no conversations about Oliver. Just an invitation. I smiled. Not because everything had been repaired. Some things never fully are, but because I had finally learned the difference between love and obligation. Real family doesn't measure your worth by what you can give them. And the moment I stopped paying for everyone else's dreams, I finally started living my own.